Hello and welcome to this video of Inside Stream. I, Dr. Manmohan Radhesham Yadav, would like to wish each and every one of my viewers a very happy new year. It has been some time since I made another YouTube video, and for that I would like to apologize. My professional and personal responsibilities kept me quite occupied. In this video, I will be discussing several topics, starting with the Trump presidency. Donald Trump has been re-elected as the President of the United States, and on 20th January there will be his inauguration. Donald Trump is taking over the presidency of the United States in a time which is quite challenging for any person who is actively involved in the global politics, especially if that person is the President of the United States. Donald Trump has promised a lot in his campaigns, but looking at some of the few challenges that he will be facing, first we are going to start with the challenges on the economic front. US economy is on the brink of recession. Now there are several claims that US economy is growing, the employment numbers are looking strong, but overall the ground realities are quite bleak for the American economy. The usage of dollar is declining. Dollar as the reserve currency of this world is facing several challenges, especially from the Chinese yuan and various other currencies of the BRICS nations. Recently, Indonesia has joined the BRICS as well, further strengthening the position of the BRICS nations on the global stage on the geopolitical front. Now, President Trump has, during his election speeches, several times mentioned that he will be imposing sanctions and tariffs as high as 100% on those nations that will be switching from the US dollar to some other currency for their foreign settlements. Now, although these speeches may sound good to the American audience, but at the end of the day, whenever tariffs are imposed, they are imposed on foreign companies and corporations, but the domestic companies and corporations, they pass down these tariffs, these increased taxes to the ultimate consumer. And this is not a very positive move when it comes to the consumer, when it comes to the US voter. It will lead to inflation on a massive scale, which may cause political crisis for the president-elect Donald Trump. Now, US dollar is facing crisis, and one of the major reasons for that is that Biden presidency has seen a massive increase in the US debt, and Janet Yellen, after repeated issues of US bonds and treasuries, has continued to increase the percentage yield on the US bonds, resulting in the declining value of the US currency. Inflation is well above 4% in the US economy, although by the standards of a developing nation, it isn't much, but when it comes to a developed nation, it is a significant percentage. Now, another challenge that Trump will be facing is the Ukrainian war. Donald Trump, in a recent interview, has stated that this war, this Russo-Ukrainian war, is Biden's war. He has pretty much distanced himself and has even said that he is giving a 100-day deadline. He's setting a 100 days deadline to resolving this conflict, and in that case, in case the US government, the Trump government, fails to come up with any substantial treaties or agreements with the Russian government, it is very likely that the US government will be walking away from this Project Ukraine, or the Ukrainian war as many people like to call it. European Union has several times said that it is ready to step in the shoes of the United States if and when the US withdraws from the Ukrainian war, although the European economy is itself in crisis. Now, Donald Trump has, in his speeches during the election campaigns in the US, several times stated that he can end the Ukrainian war in 24 hours. Of course, any person with a reasonable sense knows that it is almost impossible to end a war in 24 hours. It doesn't work that way. But as a person who is willing to talk to the Russian president. Let us not forget that during the Joe Biden presidency, there has been virtually no diplomatic contact between the leadership of the United States or the Russia with the Russians. So at least Donald Trump is moving in a direction which is trying to establish or re-establish contacts with the current Russian regime. And although it may not resolve the Ukrainian war immediately, but at least it is the first step that is being taken. Now, there are several factors on which President Trump would like to negotiate with or talk with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. One of them, of course, one of the primary topics of discussion will no doubt be the Ukrainian war. But along with that, Donald Trump seems to be much interested in purchasing the Nord Stream pipeline from the Russians that will allow the US government to purchase oil from the Russians and supply to the Europe while earning some kind of commission from the European Union or perhaps from the Russians. Another topic that will be up for discussion and something that is very much of interest for both the parties is the seizure of Russian assets that are considered to be or estimated to be worth well over 300 billion US dollars. Vladimir Putin would be much interested in the fact that Trump may unfreeze those assets and allow the Russian government to use it, while Trump may use these assets as a bargaining tool with the Russians for coming to an agreement on various topics. Another topic that will be closely discussed and very much will be of interest to the nations of the Middle East will be the Russian and Iranian defense treaty that is about to be signed in the next few days, which will pretty much have a clause that in general, in short, can be said to be activated as a defense partnership between the Iranian and the Russian regime. So in case any nation goes against the Iranian nation, it will trigger a clause in the defense treaty which will allow the Russians to supply the Iranian regime with weapons and other military support as a defensive measure. And it is something that Trump and various other nations, which includes Israel, are quite worried about. And this will very much be a topic of discussion. And in my view, it may take even precedence when it comes to the Ukrainian war. So I believe the primary topic of discussion between Vladimir Putin and President Trump will be the Iranian and Russian defense treaty that is about to be signed. The second topic will very much be associated with the energy crisis that is going on. And the next topic, perhaps the third topic, would be the Ukrainian war that is ongoing. Moving on to the Europe. Europe is facing a major energy crisis. Nord Stream pipeline has been shut down. The treaty that allowed the transit of Russian gas through Ukraine to various European nations, West European nations, has recently expired, resulting in a massive energy crisis. And the Ukrainian government seems to be adamant on not to renew this particular treaty. So the European nations are faced with an energy challenge, an energy crisis, although there have been several claims by the European governments that they have ample reserves of energy to meet the needs of the people, although it is very doubtful since several sources seem to be claiming that the European nations are on the verge of an economic and energy crisis. Germany is deindustrializing. Large number of German corporations and companies are moving out of Germany. A large number of them have moved to the United States as the energy prices there are much lower, allowing them to produce the same commodities, same goods at much cheaper and competitive prices. The Chinese competitors, the Russian energy supplies altogether are causing a major economic crisis in the European nation. And perhaps this is one of the topics that President Trump will be discussing with the Russians, although American interest will be very much on the line and involved. Another topic that is of primary significance at this particular moment is the crisis that is being created or is going on within the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukraine is losing on an average at least 1,000 soldiers every day. Ukrainian forces are said to be on the verge of collapse. The Ukrainian front lines are very much dissolving right now in the face of the Russian aggression. In the past few months, the Russian forces are advancing very steadily, and in fact, since the start of the Ukrainian war, it is said that in the past year, 2024, in the last few months, the Russian forces have increased their rate of advance. Ukrainian counteroffensive that was launched in the region of Kursk is stalling. There are very much losses. They have suffered great number of losses in terms of armored vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, and it is said they have lost more than 30,000 soldiers in the Ukrainian, in the Kursk sector itself. Further moving on to the Russian agenda. Now, Russia has used Kursk as a bait very much. Some of the intelligence officers in the Western nations and perhaps even the Eastern European nations have been claiming that Russia knew about the upcoming Ukrainian offensive in the Kursk region, and they used this particular region, which has pretty much no important or strategic assets which may be of use for the Ukrainian government, except for a nuclear power plant which is very much secure in the rear of the Kursk region. It was used as a bait where the Ukrainian forces were lowered in and destroyed in detail by the Russian forces. It has allowed Russia to inflict massive attrition and aggressive attrition on the Ukrainian forces, while at the same time allowing it to advance on the various other regions of the front. Now, after the Kursk attack, since the entire Ukrainian government seems to be focused in the Kursk region, Russian armed forces have been steadily advancing in the various regions. Further, if we look at the Ukrainian war, right now it seems that Russians are not willing to negotiate at all, although it is very much evident from the speeches of Medvedev that he intends, or perhaps he represents, a much more hardline front in the Russian government, that the Russian forces may continue to advance all the way till Odessa. There are several regions that are being claimed by the Russian government, which include Chasiv Yar, Sumy, Kharkiv, Mariupol, Kherson. These regions are under the immediate attack of the Russian forces, while Odessa, several kilometers away from the front, is still safe, but it is still considered to be a Russian majority region where a large number of people speak the Russian language and are of Slavic origins. Russian government, and especially the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, seem to say that they want peace, they want to discuss peace, and they are looking for ways in order to achieve peace. But the position of the Ukrainian forces is declining, it is weakening with every passing day, and it has allowed the Russian government to dictate the terms of peace. President Putin has, in several interviews, stated that the Russian government is ready to hold talks, they are willing to talk, but all the talks, all the discussions should be based on the ground realities. Whereas the Ukrainian president, Vladimir Zelensky, seems to be stuck in the past. He continues to claim that the Russia must evacuate each and every region that belonged to the Ukrainian in the year 1991. So essentially he is demanding a complete Russian withdrawal from the Ukrainian fronts, and capitulation of Russia, which is almost impossible and even laughable. To think that a nation that is winning a war will listen to such absurd demands. Russian armies are advancing, and they may even continue to advance all the way till Odessa. Large number of regions, a vast portion of the Ukrainian territory, is already under the control of the Russian armed forces, under the control of the Russian government. It is estimated almost 20% of Ukraine is under Russian occupation, which Russia claims to have liberated from the Ukrainian occupation. Regardless of how one views, it is very clear and evident that the Russian forces are winning, they are advancing, and if the talks are held, Russia will be in a very strong position to dictate the terms of peace. And even if the talks fail or the talks simply didn't happen, it is very much possible and it is very much likely that Russian forces will continue to advance all the way till the regions that are being claimed by the Russian government, and perhaps all the way till Odessa. And in some ways, if we look at the mineral resource distribution of the Ukrainian nation, you will find that almost all the resources, all the major resources that are considered to be of great and immense worth for the world itself, lie in the east. So if each and every region that is being claimed by the Russia is occupied by the Russian forces, Ukraine will be losing more than 90% of its mineral resources. And if Odessa is also taken over by the Russian forces, Ukraine will have lost its only access to the seas, which means that the Ukrainian nation ceases to become a viable nation, at least in economic terms, and it will end up as a burden to the European Union if Russia does not occupy the western Ukraine. And in several interviews, and perhaps by even learned commentators from Russia, it is very evident that Vladimir Putin is not interested in western Ukraine. Perhaps he may even let western Ukraine exist just as a liability for the European nation, for the European continent, my apologies, and this will help Russia to pretty much keep the European Union pinned down in the western Ukraine, while at the same time consolidating the gains in the eastern Ukraine and benefiting from the various natural resources, minerals, and even the petrochemical reserves that exist in the Ukrainian fields and even in the exclusive economic zone of the Ukrainian nation. In the next video, I hope I am able to create it as soon as possible. I will be discussing the various topics and perhaps even the various decisions that will be taken by the Trump government and the various topics of discussion which may take place between the President Trump and Vladimir Putin. Thank you for tuning in. I wish you a very good day. Thank you.